So I'm back again with another quickish video on the Batman movie. The Batman 2021 is getting very interesting recently because it felt like yesterday when I was talking about Catwoman being Zoe Kravitz and then Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon and everything like that. And, you know, actually this all started more or less after the Robert Pattinson stuff, of course, with Jonah Hill. But now it's being reported, everyone, which you've probably already heard about, but I just wanted to offer my spin and my opinion. I'm not going to spin the story, but that he's no longer in talks to play a villain in the Batman. And in case you aren't aware, he was in talks to play either the Riddler or Penguin. Now this is where things get very interesting as well, because it's being reported now, and originally, if you guys couldn't already tell, I was actually making a video on Jonah Hill no longer being a part of the Batman movie, because now the Batman has cast its Riddler as Paul Dano, or Dano, I'm pretty sure it's Dano. And this is very, very interesting because, as you'll be able to tell, because I will go on to talk about Robert Pattinson teasing the Batman towards the end of this video, but I was originally, as I just said, talking about how Jonah Hill left, and I went on to express a couple of my fan casts, whether that is people like Matt Smith or David Tennant, who you may have heard me talk about before, and just hearing this literally breaking as I was making this video, so you're probably hearing it shortly after the news actually just broke, that Matt Reeves has actually already found the replacement for Jonah Hill, who was umming and ahhing. And I will also go on to talk about Seth Rogen in a second, because apparently he was in some minor talks to play the Penguin, which is just something I feel like I have to comment on. But where I'm seeing this is from the HollywoodReporter.com, and they're saying that Matt Reeves has found his Riddler for the Batman. Paul Dano has joined the film as the classic villain, Warner Brothers announced Thursday. So Dano's version of the character will be named Edward Nashton, a departure from the comic books in where he goes by the name Edward Nygma. But even though Edward Nashton has been like an alias of Edward Nygma before, you know, obviously there's different twists and spins usually, but normally Edward Nashton, if I remember correctly, is like an Arkhamverse version. But yeah, other than that, most people know the Riddler as, you know, Edward Nygma. And we'll get into the whole story as to why Jonah Hill has, you know, now exited the Batman in my original video in a second. But what do I honestly think of Paul? I don't mind it, but I haven't seen an awful bunch of his work. One thing I will say is I definitely see the Nygma inside him, if that makes sense. The Edward Nygma, if you will. He just definitely kind of looks the part. Even like the pictures that I'm looking at right now on screen, he does kind of fit that profile for Edward, whether it's from the comics or different versions. I mean, some have been portrayed a bit more gruff looking, but he kind of reminds me of the more subtle kind of man who turns into the Riddler, rather than coming across as a crazy kind of straight away intimidating version of the Riddler. I think they'll kind of groove him into it a little bit. However, saying that, apparently according to some sources, that, you know, Batman's Rogues Gallery is already out there and active in Gotham. So I guess for now we'll have to assume he's already been the Riddler for a certain amount of time, or at least some of the Batman villains like the Riddler and the Penguin and the others we'll be seeing in the movie have had their big names for at least some amount of time. But as I mentioned, everyone, I haven't seen him in a whole bunch, just a few films, so I would love to know what you think. I was personally hoping for somebody, I think I mentioned this earlier, someone like Matt Smith or David Tennant, but that is purely just a bunch of fan casting there. But let's get on to what I wanted to say in the original video, just exploring a little bit about Jonah Hill and why he left, and then even considering the possibility for Seth Rogen as Penguin, and then we'll move on to the Robert Pattinson comments where he teases playing Batman. But I kind of want to wind back the clocks for a second in terms of Jonah Hill, but let's get to the bite of all of this stuff, and that is that there was interest from the production in Seth Rogen for the role of Penguin, but I hear no offers or talks occurred. Now, this is interesting to hear, and I'll get on to what I think about Seth Rogen, because it's coming out from Borys, who writes for the Hollywood Reporter, and he's said a few things before about the Batman 2021, and he said that Warner Brothers is trying hard to not get into a Jack Nicholson / Batman situation where they overpay big time on the villain. Now, if you heard the rumors, I can't remember who reported this, but I think they were quite credible. I just can't remember from the top of my head that Jonah Hill was kind of requesting 10 mil, like around 10 mil for the role, a villainous role he'll be playing in this movie, whether that is Penguin or Riddler. Now, on the same time as when I spoke about this before, apparently Robert Pattinson doesn't even stand to make around half of that, so kind of under 5 million for the role of Batman. Now, I'm saying take this with a grain of salt, of course, but either way, maybe these talks did break down because of the rumored insanely high pay for Jonah Hill. Now, let me know your opinions down in the comments below if you think he deserved that. Some of you, from what I've read before, think that Jonah Hill is a great actor and, a very prestigious and Oscar nominee, and it's not exactly the first time. I'm not trying to compare him to other huge names, but some actors do get paid tens and tens of millions. So interesting, but I'm just trying to say, does he really deserve 10 mil when the main star is not even standing to make half of that? And at the same time, even while that isn't completely unusual, having the main star not earn as much as other people because they could, arguably bring in more people into the movie with their villainous presence. I just don't know how to ultimately definitively say how I feel about this, but I think I don't mind, because if he was going to play the Riddler, I kind of wanted him to play the Penguin. But let's revisit the Seth Rogen stuff. And that is, on Seth Rogen, Borys Kit says that there were some initial talks for him to play Penguin while Warner Brothers courted Hill for the Riddler, once they settled on him actually playing Riddler and not Penguin. But that too didn't work out. And how do I feel about Seth Rogen anyway? I'm not mega sure. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big Seth Rogen fan. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm huge, but just like most people, I'm kind of a fan of his work. He doesn't necessarily bleed so much into the most dramatic acting, because obviously he's mostly known for his comedic roles. But that doesn't mean, and I'm not going to automatically be one to straight away be like, oh, he can't play that role. I mean, he could literally, it could be a similar situation to where someone like, Robert Pattinson gets cast, people hate it, but come on, it's Batman, every time people complain. Seth Rogen could be heavily criticized and loads of people could walk out the movie and be like, oh my god, he was a great Penguin. So my gut feeling is I'm not sure. And what I can kind of conclude out of that is, if I'm not sure about it, and I've seen a lot of people aren't sure about it either, and there's maybe some actors out there where the choice does feel right automatically, and that is applied to loads of different stars, maybe they should be going for it instead of Seth. But then again, apparently for now, that kind of didn't work out, because according to Borys Kit, on the Seth Rogen rumor, there were initial talks, but that too didn't work out. So don't read too much into Seth Rogen, but we're gonna have to wait and see. And also, just another thing that I wanted to add into this video, as of when I was editing it, is that Robert Pattinson has briefly spoke about a couple of little details that I thought you guys would maybe be interested in hearing about with the New York Times. And they were asking him, you were saying earlier that we should be skeptical of any actor who wants to play the hero, and yet here you are playing Batman. And Robert Pattinson goes on to say that Batman's not a hero though. He's a complicated character. I don't think I could ever play a real hero. There's always got to be something a little bit wrong. I think it's because one of my eyes is smaller than the other one. And there's a couple more things that I'll just get to, and I think I get what he's saying there. And I mean, some people are I've already seen online taking this way too literally, because he goes on to talk about other perfect comic book characters in a second, or even what he just said there. And Batman is flawed. Often in the comics, even though he does a lot of good things, you could argue he is as mentally disturbed as some of his craziest rogues gallery, but he just decided to flip it on the coin on the other side and go about doing things a much different way. And that's what I kind of like about what he's saying there. He is a hero, but there's a lot more to Bruce Wayne and the Batman than just, a straight lined gleaming hero that's propped up to be this example of the pinnacle one, which is more in Superman's kind of territory. But I'm not saying to Superman fans that he doesn't have some complicated depth to him as well. The New York Times then asks, what is it about Batman that excites you? And he says, I love the director Matt Reeves, and it's a dope character. His morality is a little bit off. He's not the golden boy, just as we kind of went over. Unlike almost every other comic book character, there is a simplicity to his worldview, but where it sits is strange, which allows you to have more scope with the character, which, as I just said, with the way I was kind of going into Batman's character a little bit, I completely agree with. And there's people saying online, just saying every other comic book character is perfect. He didn't mean it that way. Just, Batman is Well, yeah, just to say the least, quite a disturbed individual himself. And he even goes on to address kind of what I was just saying about some people interpreting things in certain ways, because they asked him, you just paused, and he says, I just fear that when I say anything about Batman, people online are like, what does this mean? And I don't know. I used to be very good at censoring myself, but I've said so many ridiculous things over the years, so I'm always curious about when I'm promoting these movies, how many times I can mess up. It just feels like with every movie that comes out, there's always one quote from me where it's like, how? What kind of out-of-body experience produced that screaming nonsense? I think that's more or less everything in this video, guys. Let me know what you think of Paul Dano playing the Riddler in the Batman 2021. This honestly just came out of absolutely nowhere very quickly after Jonah Hill, and I do get it because of the whole long-winded negotiations that were going on there between Warner Brothers and Jonah, and now I guess, you know, to fill the void, they've already found their Riddler, and according to some reports anyway previously, they had already had their eyes on other actors. And also, yeah, let me know what you think about Seth Rogen. Do you think he could surprise us? Or maybe you're not needing convincing anyway and you think that he would have killed the role of the Penguin? Anyway, everyone, if you want to stay up to date with any kind of details to do with the Batman 2021, subscribe to this channel. Whether it's minuscule or big details, I will try and deliver it to you guys. Check out my last couple of videos here if you're interested in them. And thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, Bat family, in the next video. Goodbye.